Okay, we'll get started. We'll get started. Our main, if you don't have a handout, there are handouts back in my left hand on the last table back there. And our main topic today is going to be tax preparation. And my name is Tom Kreuzer. I'll be presenting. But first we'll cover a few club agenda items. Our next meeting after this is February 17th here in the Baltic Room. And in that meeting, we'll cover the results of the PC Club survey. And within that, I produced a document that's, I don't know what it is, about 20 pages. It talks about some of the trends that we have in hardware and software, some of the upgrades that you should consider. We also survey on potential meeting topics, so we can talk a little bit about that. And this year we did get about 65 people that responded, so I want to thank those that did respond there. And the club itself, what do we have, 140 some people at this point, so it's a pretty good number there. We also do have a Macintosh Special Interest Group, and they have monthly meetings, and their meeting for January was just last Friday, but they have another one coming up in February. And they usually set their agenda right before the meeting and have that. You can also look out on our website, and it'll have the schedule for the various meetings. Our officers, our president is Jim Holman, and Jim's in the middle there. Our vice president is Linda Brown, and I don't see Linda right now. Our membership secretary is Paul Ebert, and he's the one trying to shake people down over there for checks. Mike Griffin leads our Macintosh SIG and is also our treasurer. Stan Miller, there's Stan back in the right corner there. He's our secretary. Andrew Petrucci is our communication coordinator, and I don't see Andrew. My name's Tom Kreuzer. I'm a director at large. Members old and new, if you do want to pay your dues, you can see Paul there. And also a reminder, if you are changing your email or retiring from 3M, make sure and notify us, because that's the way we send out the notices and the renewals and stuff like that is all through the email. Suggestions for topics, you can email your ideas for topics or talk to any of the board members. We're always looking for people to present on any hardware and software that they may be using at work or at home. And if you don't want to present, we have a monthly eBytes newsletter, and we encourage you to send something in. It can be as short as a sentence or two or as long as many pages as you want. And it can be your experience that you're having with certain software, things that you like, don't like about some of the software or hardware that you have. Send it in and we'll include it in our newsletter. Website, we publish our past meetings, so if you miss any of our past meetings, you can go back and find the slides and the handouts. And we usually do try and record them, so the recordings are also out there. We also have a deals section, and then I mentioned our monthly eBytes newsletter. If you miss any or want to check, you can check out there. And it lists the URL. The URL is also listed on the handout in the bottom there. Any questions about the club before we get to the main topic? And Linda just joined us there. You're welcome. Good luck. Any questions anyone has about the club before we get to the main topic there? Okay. Our main topic today is going to be tax preparation, and you no longer have to fill out the forms that we used to all get the forms in the mail, and you'd have to sharpen your pencil, and you'd send them in, and you'd have to wait weeks for a refund or to hear anything back. You no longer have to do that. And if you're currently paying a professional to do it, you can save yourself a chunk of money by doing it yourself. The packages have got very sophisticated over time, and they've made it very easy to answer questions, and then those questions end up filling the right amounts on the right forms and keeping everything in line. They simplify and speed up the torturous task, doing all the calculations for you. They ensure that you account for all the appropriate income and deductions that you may have, and they guide you through in an interview format, so it's just not a spreadsheet of entering in raw numbers. Before we start, we'll just take a little survey. How many people prepared their own taxes but did it with the paper forms? So they didn't use a package last year. They just used the paper forms. Anyone do that?
I used it. Until last year, I did paper. So
you did paper? Okay.
I'm determined not to pay somebody $50 for software that I can use for myself.
Okay. No, there's people there that do that, and again, depends on the complexity. Everybody's situation's a little different too. How many paid a tax professional to fill out? Okay, so we've got quite a few there. How many used an online website? And that can be TurboTax, can be TaxAct. So I myself use the online version.
So is that the account is an online version?
No, this is, well, if you went out to TurboTax and did your TurboTax without loading software locally on your PC. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences between that. How many bought the desktop tax software and did it? Okay, quite a number there. Because you'll see there are differences between the desktop and the online in terms of costs and in terms of things like that. So unfortunately, there's no magic. Everybody should be using this version if you're filing taxes.
Which is safer?
We'll talk a little bit about that. I mean, I use the online version. I know a number of people are paranoid about my data's out there, but indirectly, you have bank accounts, you have credit cards. A lot of that stuff is already out there in other systems, even if you aren't using any of the tax systems. Federal government even has all of it out there. Local volunteer services, so some people will use the local volunteer services and they'll fill out the taxes. Anybody use services like that? No. And how many didn't file their taxes? Nobody's going to admit it. I can get a 10% finder's fee if I can just get a few people here. Actually, I do know. I come from a small town of 1,600 people, and one of the families in there was years ago, if you remember, the Posse Comitatus. They were a group that I forgot where they moved to, but then they refused to pay taxes. And they got away for like 10 years without paying taxes, and then the government came down on them, and by that time, each of them owed hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they were all put in jail for, some of them up to 10 years there. So it's not a good idea to mess with the IRS. They have the most power of any organization in terms of freezing bank accounts and penalties and stuff like that. So
that's the way it's scam, though.
Yes, there certainly are.
People are afraid of the IRS, and so when they call up and threaten you,
they
send you money.
We're going to come against you there. I mentioned tax preparation. So if you're having it professionally done today, this is from 2014 tax return. The average cost for a professional to do a 1040 with a state return and no itemized deduction was $159. With itemized deductions in a state return, $273. And with a Schedule A and C, business income and state return, it went up to $447. So it is worthwhile if you are paying. You can kind of do it yourself and save yourself a bunch of money there. Okay, first thing we'll cover is some of the questions when you're trying to compare these programs or figure out which versions, because you'll see there's a whole bunch of different versions that you can get. One of the things you want to ask yourself is, do you plan to file state also? And most of us being either from Wisconsin or Minnesota, you're going to also have to file, in addition to a federal return, you're going to have to file a state return. And you'll see some of the packages charge for that state, and they charge by each state that you need. And then, well, we'll cover some of this other. Yeah, if I lived in South Dakota, no state income tax. Don't have to file. Texas, don't have to file. So there are advantages of some of these other states there. And also, if you're below the minimum income levels or that, you also wouldn't have to file. Yeah. Another question that you want to ask yourself in that is, do you plan to e-file or by paper? So with all these packages, you're going to have the option, like Paul was talking about, of printing them out and sending in paper to the IRS, or you can e-file and electronically transmit the information in. And the paper usually doesn't cost you anything extra. The e-file can cost you an extra fee to have it filed e-file. So that's another thing to keep in mind there. Another thing is, how many returns do you file? So if you're filing for yourself, or you and your spouse file separately, and then you also file for some kids that may be in college or staying, or how many people are going to use this software? And if you've got a bunch of people, again, some of the packages charge per person, and some of them give you maybe 5 returns that you can do. So when you're comparing, the costs, again, are affected by the total number of returns that you might be doing. Another thing that affects it is, do you itemize on your return, or do you file a 1040 EZ or an A? The EZ or A form is essentially kind of that one-page form. If you have anything more complicated, then you need more advanced versions than that. So they charge for the additional forms and for the more advanced versions. Do you have gains from investments? And that can be dividends, interest, your CDs, bank interest, stock sales, stock options. Each of these has additional forms and information that you have to fill out. And yeah, there's gains from lawsuits. There's all kinds of forms in there. Do you own a home? So in some cases, you're doing special filing for the home. You may be having a small business in the home or that, and therefore there's additional forms in that to fill out. Do you have rental property? Again, more forms, things to fill out. Do you own a small business? The other thing, we talked about online versus it being locally on your PC. Do you want the software on your PC or Mac, or are you comfortable enough with using a website? And we'll talk a little more about that, but certainly that's a big decision. You'll see there's differences in prices between the two with it. Do you want to import last year's information? Some of the packages don't let you import last year's information. So if you were starting out, you'd have to retype all the information in, potentially look up figures from last year's tax forms and enter them in. And so it's not importing any of the data from your last year's tax return. Do you want to import data like W-2s? So saving you the trouble of entering all the numbers and that off of the W-2s. You also have options for that. 1099, dividends, interest, and Bs. And by that I mean, let's say you have a Fidelity account instead of entering all that information into the taxes, you can download it from the Fidelity into your tax, and it'll put all the stuff in the right columns and fill out the right forms and put the gains and losses, and everything will be filled out for you. Another thing is, do you like tips or planning tools for next year? So a number of the more advanced versions will start making recommendations on how you can make your taxes easier next year, or how to minimize your taxes that you pay. It'll go into options and things that you can be doing. All of the packages that we talk about, they all have a number of things in common, and some of them are the choice of direct form entry or a guided interview that fills in the forms. And by that, if you're familiar with the tax forms, it's kind of, put in this amount, copy this value over to this form. You're going through there, which you may be jumping back and forth between forms and doing things. The guided interview asks you questions. Do you have a house? If you have a house, how much real estate taxes did you pay? And things like that. It guides you through, and in English and not in the terminology that you tend to see on the forms when you're filling out the forms. But both of them will let you use either one when you're going. So if you know that you want to change a value on a particular form, then the itemized deductions, and you want to change that amount, you can jump right there. Otherwise, usually what most people do is they start out with the interview and they let the package guide them through the entire process, and then maybe later they might have to change a value or two, and then they'll go back directly to the form and do it. All these packages offer tons of help and guidance along the way. All of them do have a final review of your return. So the final review goes through and checks if you're missing a form or you're missing a value. It'll notify you of that, and it won't let you file until you provide all the information that's needed. And then when you do file, you're going to have the option to print it out and mail it in, or do the e-file where it's electronically filed. Yes?
Yeah, I've used TaxAct. Always gone to the library or post office. Instruction manual or some extra things there to read and figure out. Well, over the last 3 or 5 years, post office has phased out, and the local library has phased out. So now would be a good time to go to the IRS website where you can order those. We'll send them to you for free, but it takes time to get them. So now's the time, like, still have those paper copies rather than printing on yourself on the website.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I'd say in the past it was more important because that was kind of your sole source of information. Now most of the packages have extensive help and information in there where most everything that's covered in some of these manuals and that is also covered in there. But if you do want the detail, you can go out there, you can order them, and then they'll send it to you in the mail, or you can look at them online and browse through them there. And there's various ones. There's ones for the individual forms, which are quite small, and then there's one you can get like a 1040, which I don't know what that is, 200 pages or something like that. It's quite large, and it goes into a lot of detail. The trouble is trying to find stuff in there. You'll find yourself, well, I thought it was here, but where is it? Trying to find it, and that's where some of the online packages certainly make it a lot easier, because as they're going through the interview, if you have a question of what do they really mean by this, or can I include this medical expense or that, there's usually a help, and it'll explain exactly in detail what you can do there. Yes?
Minnesota's going to follow the IRS lead, and they're not informed in libraries or other public places either. I don't know if you can order from the state as far as getting a paper.
In most cases, you can order them, but what a lot of states and everybody's doing is saying we aren't going to mail stuff out, because in the past, if you filed electronically or anything, and that could include a tax preparer doing your stuff, it knows that you didn't need a form or shouldn't need a form this year. So they won't even mail you anything out, because you think of the tons and tons of paper that all these forms and instructions and that take up. So it is nice with the packages that you basically have access to all this. In addition to the tons of help and that, they also, all these packages, depending on the version that you have, also comes with where you can ask questions. So you can be in a chat with somebody, you can call a number. If you buy the H&R Block package, you can walk into a store and ask a question free of charge. So there's all these different sources of getting questions answered in there. And they do vary from package to package, which version you need or what kind of help is available there. And it beats calling the government's 800, because if you're not familiar with that, they do have an 800 number you can call, but I think they've done additional cutbacks this year where I think they're saying the average wait time is probably going to be 2 hours. So, unless you have a question that you can get in right now, the closer it gets to April there, you may be on the phone 2 hours, 3 hours just to talk to somebody. And what was it? 60% of their answers were wrong, and they'll say that you still have to pay penalties and interest if they're wrong. So it's not like you're protecting yourself. So usually the better approach is these packages and look up the information. They have FAQs out there, and again, you can ask questions. You can find out answers to just about everything there. Okay, yeah.
In Stillwater, I know that the AARP or as a group of retired accountant helpers that work on people's taxes or work on. They'll help you with your tax group. Typically, that's for modest or low income people. But if you have a question, you know you're at least in Stillwater, you can go in, ask them a question, and you probably get a decent answer.
Yes.
And you can also, when you told that, done it, if you completed all your tests, you can take it in and they'll look at it. They won't sign their name to it, but they'll ask you some questions that guide you.
Please don't do that. Please don't do that.
Well, you want to count?
Not at Stillwater. So, like, we're supposed to e-file everything we look at. You're not going to take in half an hour or more to look at a return.
And that's a good point, because if somebody's filling it out by hand and they make arithmetic mistakes and they didn't add this or they didn't move the right number, that's the reason for using these packages, because you'll see when you do have simple tax forms, you can do it for free online here. And that'll put the stuff in the right categories. It'll add stuff up correctly. And so you don't need somebody looking at it. When we talk about this final review, that's essentially what a manual person used to do, is say, oh, did you move this number over? Is this over here? Well, these packages are doing all that for you automatically. So unless you blatantly put in the wrong numbers of your W-2 or something like that, everything is done correctly there. But yeah, okay. I talk about the different versions and options. Now what you'll see is it's very confusing with all these options, versions, and prices. And it's kind of just like taxes in general. You'll find that it's not easy to get what is the price that you're paying here, because there are so many different places that you can buy it, so many links you can use, and each one's going to give you a different price and a different set of options. This one you can e-file 1 return, this one you can e-file 3 returns, this one comes with the state, this one doesn't. You'll see that it gets very confusing there. And that's why I mentioned in here, find out what you need and use those questions that we went over in the previous slide, and then you can match that to find the best vendor and the version that's right for you. Yep. Yes, most of them, and again, it depends on the version. The higher the version, it'll do more tax planning. So it'll help you plan for next year and tell you this is what you should be doing, and this is some options to look into in that. And a number of these packages, you don't have to just use it this time of year. You could have started this 6 months ago and put in some preliminary numbers just to see, am I going to owe money or am I getting a refund? Because the last thing that you want to do is, in my opinion, is get a refund. I'm never going to give the government any of my dollars. I always pay in to federal and state every year there. Because if you're getting a refund, you're giving them free money there, which they're holding on to for up to 16 months there. Well, send the money to me. I'll hold on to your money and give it back after 16 months. And if you're happy with that, just keep sending me money, and okay, let's go on. There's literally hundreds of packages out there. There's all these different sites. There's all these different packages, but there's really only 3 main vendors. And the 3 main vendors are TurboTax, TaxAct, and H&R Block. And H&R Block bought the package Tax Cut. If 2-3 years ago you used a package called Tax Cut, that's now what H&R Block has. But these are the 3 main packages. They all score about 5 stars out of 5 stars as far as tax packages. There's just little differences between them, but you really can't go wrong too much with any of them there. Each company offers multiple versions with those questions that we talked about. Should be able to help you dictate which version you need. Do you have a house? Do you have stock sales? Do you have this? Depending on that, that's going to mean that you're going to need a certain version there. All of them will let you start filing for free. So if you're not sure which package to use, technically you could go out here and you could start with TurboTax, put your stuff in, then you could go to TaxAct, put all your stuff in, then you could go to H&R Block, and most of them don't require you to pay until you're ready to file. So you can start the process and you can put in your numbers and you can see which versions they're going to ask you to upgrade to, or if you need state or you want to e-file, you can see what the costs are going to be.
This is the advantage of the online version versus if I go to buy, then I have to shell out the money. I'm going to walk away with the software, right?
No, even the packages that you load themselves, when you're going through the interview and doing stuff, if you answer a question that requires, let's say you bought the deluxe package and you say, I have rental property, then it's going to say you are going to require the premium version. It's going to cost so much money, and it will download that to your machine for a cost. You're not buying the whole new package. You're just paying a difference between the two.
I can go to Best Buy and say I want
No, you'll see in here that you can't. The free stuff is the online version. I thought you were talking about you bought the basic and then then you must pay. Yes, nobody's going to give you a free disc. Okay. The prices that I list on the sheet and what you'll see up here are from their websites. There are many links from third parties and discounts from other stores. So if you have a Fidelity account, you can go to Fidelity, and there's a link in there for a discount on TurboTax, and go there. So, and if you are a member of AARP, you get discounts. And if you have Mint, if you have a Mint account for financial reporting and budgets and that, you get a discount. And so there's all these other packages with links that'll show you different prices and stuff like that. So that's where I say it gets confusing. I'm showing some of the prices off of their website, but you'll see all kinds of prices the more you look around there. And personally myself, I've used TurboTax for probably going on 20, 25 years, starting with the old version way back when. Currently, I use a free version of TurboTax from Fidelity. And I have a Fidelity private client group account, and that gives me free access to TurboTax Premium. And the e-file portion of it. So again, depending on if you're affiliated with some of the investment houses and things like that, look on their sites to see if they have an offer and what they have. Oh, yeah, I went to the end. Yeah, I hit the wrong one. Let me go back here. Where are we here? Let's go back here. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the online services versus loading it locally on your PC. Because the online services let you create and file your taxes using the internet, so there's no software loaded on your PC. They contain the same tools and functions that you'll find on the desktop versions. If we go back 5 years ago or 10 years ago, the desktop versions were a better user interface. They were easy to use, things like that. The online was more dry and harder to use. But now the functionality, the ease of use is basically the same between both the desktop and the online versions. The biggest concern that people have is identity theft. And because you're doing stuff online, all your numbers and everything are stored up at their account, in an account on their servers. But what you'll see is experts and everybody will reassure the customers that the online tax services are perfectly secure. They're as secure as everything else on the internet. Banking accounts, stock transactions, things like that. They're as safe as any of that. Just like the desktop software, you can start or pause at any time, and that information that you create is saved so that I can go back 5 years ago and I can look at my return. I can do an amended return for 5 years ago out on the site. I don't have to have it. Now, what most people who have online will do is, in addition to e-filing, I'll create a PDF of all my forms, and I keep that PDF. But if I had to file again or do anything, all that information is still out on the vendor's site, and they have to keep that information for you.
How long they keep it?
I'm not sure. I think, what is the federal limit? The federal limit is 5 years, 7 or 5, okay. And so that's, you know, you don't have to keep stuff forever, but unless you were malicious, the federal government cannot go back any further than that.
You don't print it off.
I put it on a PDF, and I keep the PDF file. But, you know, just to save paper and not have a big chunk, having it in a PDF format works for anything, just about anything. And what you'll see, too, is most of the services nowadays, so if I went with TurboTax and have that PDF file, I can import that into TaxAct, and TaxAct will take all of my previous numbers off of there and start loading from that. So it does optical character recognition, pulls information off of that so that I don't have to manually re-enter past stuff. So most of them will let you import PDF files and that into their package because they want to make it easy for you to use their package, especially if you came from a vendor there, a different vendor. You just go out to the site, make your changes, and it'll file an amended return for you. It costs you money to send it e-file, or if you want to print it off or whatever, but you can file amended returns. Yeah, I wouldn't bank from a coffee. I wouldn't go out to my bank from a coffee shop. I wouldn't use PayPal. I wouldn't do any of that stuff from a public Wi-Fi, and there's all kinds of public Wi-Fis, whether it's at the airport or coffee shops or things like that. That's a whole nother discussion of be careful what you do or where you do it. Okay, the typical versions offered by these different vendors, a lot of them do have the free version, and that is, in most cases, the online version. It's for basic tax needs. Federal filing is free. State sometimes costs you money, but that's usually limited to a 1040 EZ or an A form, which is a very simple form. You have no itemized deductions. You have no interest in dividends. You don't have rental property or a house or anything else. It's just a very simple, this is my one W-2, and I'm taking standard deductions and everything else. Basic will give you simple tax needs. It usually includes some basic deduction information like itemized deductions. It has limited forms and some help available. The deluxe or plus versions are usually for homeowners or investors. So if you're into buying and selling stock options, you have a home or a rental property, then usually you fall into the deluxe or plus version there. It offers more information for deductions, and it also offers tools for life events. You got married, or is it better to file separately, or is it better to file joint? It'll take you through and compare, and you can see what makes the most sense there, and keeps track of all that. Then they all have a premium version. Premium version is usually just for the people that are self-employed, so you have a lot of deductions to keep track of. Rental property owners. It's the full functionality, has advanced calculators and additional investment resources. That can be advice, sheets, different things like that that'll spit out. So let's take a look at TurboTax. We won't go into each of them, but this explains what Paul was talking about. The online version of TurboTax, you can file for free, and it'll let you do both the state and the federal for free for the simple version. Deluxe, you can see 34 actually costs you more money for the state than it does for the federal there. And so you can see some of these different prices. If you want to load it on your PC, the CD or download versions, you can see typically cost a little more, although some of these come with first federal e-file is free for the free there. The others you get 5. 5 e-files are free there. State, again, the software itself may cost you money, and when you buy the state, you're not necessarily getting the ability to e-file with the state. That can be a separate fee. And so that's where I mentioned that it's complex, and you have to look at how many state e-files are you going to have, how many federal e-files are you going to have, and to look at the total price, you have to kind of do a little figuring there of what's going on.
So, Tom, one thing I've noticed over the years is when you had full internet, the CD version was the only one we could use. But lately, what's happening is the CD version has almost the same amount of downloading as you would get with an online version.
Yeah, the problem with the CD version, if you're not familiar, is the tax laws do change,
right,
and they're changing all the time. Even after April 1st, there's a possibility that the government makes some changes, and so those changes that occur. You bought a version from Best Buy, well, the first thing that it has to do is update itself, so it has to go down and download a large amount of updates to forms and information and stuff like that. And then let's say you start entering stuff in, and then a week from now you get back to it. It's downloading maybe a whole bunch of things that have been corrected in the meantime. So, yes,
but
there's...
the guys who steal your identity are going to file as quick as possible before you get a chance.
If they want to file my taxes and pay my taxes, go for it, because they aren't going to get a refund.
There you go.
Yeah, I guarantee you, they are not going to get a refund. They are so. People who worry about that, they've got other worries. But the business about file as early as possible, that usually doesn't work, because if you do have investment accounts and stuff like that, even though most banks and investment houses are supposed to have the forms to you electronically or in the mail by the end of January, some of them wait until the end of February or into March, or do an adjustment. Oh, we sent you the early one, and now we have an adjustment. And if you've already filed, you have 2 choices. Either you create an amended return, which is going to cost you money, or you just say, chances are the difference isn't that much. I'll just wait and see if the federal government contacts me or not. So, you have choices there. But filing early, I never believe in that. And like I say, I never get a refund, so I'm going to hold on to my return until the last day. And then I'll pay my taxes and I'll send it in. Yeah.
Don't you have to be careful with how much you owe, or are you going to pay it?
Yes, the general rule is if you pay as much as you paid last year, that you owed last year, then there'll never be a penalty, or the amount that you owe is within 10% of what you owe this year. Then you never pay a penalty there. So yes, I'm figuring out my taxes as I go along from quarter to quarter, because I have investments. Those investments, some years there's a lot of money, other years there's very little. Well, I know from quarter to quarter what I have. I'll pay at a quarterly basis, I'll pay money in, but I'll keep it below what I'm going to owe the government. And once I've reached last year's amount, I'm not sending in anything extra, because I don't have to. I'll send it in on April 15th. So that's where you can, figure out what to pay. You don't have to pay everything all the time. You have to know what the laws are so that you pay only when needed there. Okay? Let's take a look at, where are we here?
That thing isn't important as it used to be with high interest rates. With low interest rates, money is
not depends on how much you owe. I'll still take my money and earn 1% interest rather than let them take it and that. I can get 1%. Just go out to bankrate.com. As low as $1,000, you can get 1%. You can get 1.25% right now for a 1-year CD. That's a different topic. This is the example out of the TurboTax. You can go into products and pricing, and you can go in by online or download, and we're currently in the online. Here they have a couple of simple questions, and these are along the same questions that we looked at when you're doing stuff. If you identify what you want, it'll recommend a version. So all the versions that they have are listed down here, and they have some of the questions also listed here. But you can see the prices, and you can see what options they're providing with these different versions here, whether it's the free version, the deluxe, the premier, or home and business there. And then there's different.
TurboTax used to be that the deluxe was good enough for stocks and bonds and things, but a few years later, you had to buy the premier. Right. They put stuff out.
Yeah, it used to be that the deluxe did things like stock options, and now if you have stock options, you need the premier. I mean, you can still do it actually with deluxe. It's just that you have to know what numbers to fill in where. Whereas if you don't know where to fill that stuff in, then you do need the premier, and then it'll guide you through filling this stuff out and making sure that it gets to the right forms and that. So some of them, it's not even a case of additional forms. It's just the interview is more elaborate and fills stuff out. But this is an example, like if you say, oh, I have a house and I have stocks and bonds, then see it's recommending the premier here. So if you fill a couple of these out, you'll see what version it's recommending there for you. And so you can go out and again, you can check out these various sites and get the information. Some of the pros of TurboTax, and again, these reviews I got from a couple of different places online, and basically it still stands as the most streamlined and intuitive way to file your taxes. Even though all the TaxAct and the H&R Block have come close to it now, most people will rate it still as the top of the line package there, and that's because of its audit threat and formulas that it uses to check and see whether you might be audited, and for tax planning and the various help there. Some of the cons, the biggest con now is the price. The price just keeps climbing every year of TurboTax. If you remember, I mean, years ago it used to be $19.95, and that version would work fine for everybody. Now, as you can see, you may be paying upwards of $60, $80 by the time you e-file and buy a version there. So the price just does continue to climb there. TurboTax is able slightly over the competition in terms of design, customer service, and audit protection there. TaxAct, that's probably the second, usually comes in second or in some cases first on some of the reviews, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those reviews later. They're the low-cost leader, so if you're looking for the cheapest package to do stuff, TaxAct will always come in as the cheapest there. And you can see their prices are considerably less than what you see in TurboTax. They are the most affordable, especially with its online plus version, priced at $14.99. It's able to stay less expensive by not offering many high-end options needed for the self-employed, investors, and property owners. It's perfectly built for a standard W-2 worker with less than confusing tax return situations. So it works for most people without complexity there. It does lack some of the essential tools for self-employed investors and property owners. And if you, I don't know, is anyone a TaxAct user? Did you get notified? Okay.
I don't recall.
Okay. It just came out, happened back in December. There was a breach where they stole a whole bunch of records. And it's like all these other breaches, you know, will your account, the information out there, be used for anything? Probably not, but again, they have to report it that somebody did break into their site and get access to stuff.
I thought I heard that a couple months ago that TurboTax had a problem in 2015 miscalculating and misguiding.
There's been over the years in all the packages, because we mentioned that the tax laws can change, or they can change the deductions or things like that even after the forms are sent out. So there can be changes in January, February, and March, and even in April there. It's possible that if you file early and stuff like that, that you may have to file an amended because things have changed there. And that's true of any of the vendors there. There was, I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, I think it was TurboTax that early on had a problem with addition. Some of the addition of items it wasn't doing correctly, and the people that, again, that had filed early, they paid for those returns to be filed again. And I wouldn't use this, even though they had a breach, TaxAct had a breach there, I wouldn't hold that against them. They're the low-cost leader, stuff like that. I tried using TaxAct several years ago, and the biggest problem that I had was at that time it did not let me electronically load in my 1099s from like Fidelity or Vanguard or from Hewitt or things like that. I had to manually enter it in, and I'm a person who doesn't like to manually enter things in when there's options to automatically load. So it certainly works. I'm not sure. I tried to find on their website how much they let you import, you know, from financial institutions or stuff like that, and I couldn't see in there. But I know, like I say, years ago, the situation was that their list of imports were like 3 places you could import from. It wasn't, if you're familiar with Quicken and other deals, there's maybe 100 financial institutions you can import from. H&R Block, I mentioned that was formerly called TaxCut. They purchased that, so you can see their prices for the various versions and what they offer. One of the advantage, well, let's get to the pros and cons. It stands out from the crowd because of its free customer service with over 12,000 locations. So if you buy the package, you can walk into any store and you can ask a question live of anybody in the store there. If you're making the transition away from an accountant and you just want the face-to-face interaction, H&R Block is probably your choice there. It'll let you import tax returns from TurboTax and TaxAct. Also, it has a unique opportunity. If you are getting a refund, you can get that refund in the form of gift cards, and they'll add an additional 10% to the gift card. So if you wanted a Red Lobster gift card and you were getting $1,000 back from the government, they'd make it $1,100 on the gift card there. So again, it's not something I'd recommend because you shouldn't be getting a refund, but if you are getting a refund and you do like gift cards, their incentive is to use their service, and they'll give you an additional 10% of whatever your refund is. Cons, the H&R block package is kind of bland. It's not as user-friendly. I mean, it's better than the rest, the hundreds of other tax packages, but if you compare it to the interview style and the ease of navigating and finding things in either a TaxAct or a TurboTax, it's not as easy to use there and to navigate around. These are some of the ratings. PC Magazine and for the tax year 2014 did rate TaxAct as their #1 package. Most of the other services, when they've rated tax packages, you'll see various combinations of this, where TurboTax is first, and then either H&R Block is second, and TaxAct is third, or TaxAct is second, and H&R Block is third. But they all rate, almost all of them end up rating them essentially the same, 5 stars, 4.5 stars. So it's not like one is really worse than the other. You can't go wrong really with either of them there. The other thing I want to mention here is if you do donations and things like that, there are sites to help you keep track of your donations. Even if you aren't using TurboTax, there's a package. It used to be a package that was sold called It's Deductible, but now it's free and you can use it out on the website there, or there's a mobile app for it also. And it'll keep track of your donations. So if you're donating to Goodwill, have garage sales or things like that, you can plug in all your stuff and it'll keep an itemized list of everything such that if you're audited or that, now you can back up all those costs, or you didn't just pull a number out of the air and say, I'm going to use this number this year. So this will let you do it. There's also sites like out at the Salvation Army, and it'll give the value of things. If you're not familiar with some of these sites, an example, a T-shirt that you have that you donate, I believe they let you write off $3 per T-shirt. So this is where I tell my people, because I'm a garage sale person also, I like to have garage sales and I purchase stuff at garage sales. But frequently, you make more money deducting it than you do selling stuff at your garage sale, because you can write off more value, and you're gonna come out ahead deducting it than selling a T-shirt for 25 cents at a garage sale when you can write it off for $3 on your income tax. But these sites will give you the values that you can use for estimating your donations, and then that's what you can use on your income tax when you're itemizing in that. So they're very good sites for doing stuff like that. Questions? Yes. I believe it's only for the online version.
You can get a downloadable version, but typically it's just not for the sale. It's the same price on sale as it came.
The prices are very confusing, because when you start to compare them again, what you'll see is Target will have a sale, and Target is selling the deluxe with one state filing, and they're giving a gift card, and they're selling it for $39.95. Well, that's cheaper than what you can buy it for online, and so there's different things there that you have to look for if you're purely concerned with what the price is there. There's so many different prices, and the price from Fidelity, you won't know until you go out to the Fidelity site, log in with your account, go to the tax help, and then there'll be a link there that'll take you, and then you can see what the prices are to the packages. And don't start filling out your stuff before you check out links and stuff like that, because if you start filling out, let's say TurboTax, and then you find this other link has it cheaper, you aren't going to get the cheaper price because you've already started at the other price. Yes.
There are limitations on you have like TurboTax. You fill out forms for like
Yeah, most of them will not charge you anything additional to print out. It's the e-filing portion of it that you pay additional for. But then some of them will let you do 5 of them, that kind of thing. And that's where you have to start saying, okay, I can print these out, but if I have to print this out, how many pages is it? And then I have to mail it in. How much postage is it? How much is it costing me to do this? And then if you do state, because state, I have people say, well, I'm not going to pay for state. It's only 1 page. But for most people, it's 1 page. But you have to send all the federal stuff in with it. So, is it worthwhile paying, another $10 to e-file a state and not have anything to do there? And then I don't have to write a check. I link it to my bank account, and they take the money out of the bank account. Then I also know exactly when the federal government got it. So you get the guarantee that they got it. Didn't get lost in the mail. The check, you didn't, maybe you forgot something on the check or that. You don't have to worry about any of that when you e-file.
I read that you're getting a refund.
They have less people working. I think they're preparing people. However, the standard type things where they don't have to audit it or a red flag doesn't flag it out of the system where somebody has to manually look at it, those should flow through normally. And so there shouldn't be any great delay. It's when you start talking about, oh, there's a flag, a missing value, or you were supposed to carry forward a number from last year onto this year's form and it didn't make it, things like that. Right. I mean, in terms of the actual filing and that, most of that is, or the checking and that is done electronically, and so that wouldn't be hampered by fewer people on there. And that was kind of brought up because they want to get more funding for the IRS. Yes?
I was told that the online version is more likely to be updated than current as far as bug fixes and tax law changes. You already mentioned something like that. If you have a desktop version, you have to make sure you keep up with downloads and updates.
Yeah, it'll usually the minute that you log into the desktop version, if there is a new version, it'll be downloaded. And I don't know priority-wise. There's maybe a little bit of a difference where the online may be updated hours earlier than the. But I wouldn't use that. I wouldn't say that they're out of sync there. Certainly, they don't want either one to have faulty calculations or miss something in there.
So the desktop version have a link to the internet? So that
yes, you have to have a link.
Knowledge exists that there's an update.
Yeah, you have to have a link to the internet because these desktop versions do need to be updated, and they almost every time you log into it, it will be updating at least some forms or some calculations out there. It could be a table, could be a calculation, whatever. Yeah. Yes, the extension essentially is just a form. So it's a tax form, and it'll let you file the tax form for the extension there. Well, I'm not a big advocate of extensions. 99.9% of the people should never need an extension. And my background, I'm a tax accountant. I have a tax degree from St. John's University, so I started out as an accountant, and that's I know all the ins and outs there. I've been audited about 5 times in my life, so I've been through the audit process. I know how the audits go, and as long as you've got the stuff to back it up, have good records. So if you're putting deductions down, make sure that you got adequate information, and if you're keeping track of stocks and things like that, you have to have good records there.
So does TurboTax tell you that you are going to be audited or not? I mean,
No.
If they had a limit like 10%.
So the way the packages work, a lot of the packages work is when you file, it'll say what's the likelihood that you're going to be audited, and it's using averages based on this salary and that. This is what your deduction should be, and if they're above that, that's a flag. If your return gets so many points, they score it on points, then it pops out of the system, and then you're going to get audited. There's also another way that you can get audited, which is the random audit. And the random audit is just like it sounds. Randomly, they pick onesies, twosies. Now, if they have fewer people, they do fewer random audits. So that's the likelihood that you'll get pulled out for that is very small. When you do get pulled out for an audit, in most cases, the first thing that they'll do is you got audited because of a certain figure out there. And they'll contact you. They won't demand money. Don't give them a credit card number. Don't do anything. They won't call you on the phone. You'll get in the mail. You'll get a deal that says you are being audited, and this is what they have a question about. And that item that they have a question about, if you can provide adequate documentation on what it is, you provide that, audit's done. No, I don't know. My dad was audited almost every year. He had his own business.
I don't know. Talking about fraud is that you'll never get a phone call from the IRS.
You'll never get a phone call from the IRS. So anybody that says, we need your credit card or your bank account didn't clear, we've got this refund for $5,000 and we're trying to put it in your bank account. Can you give us your bank account number? And people, yes. Well, good luck. Instead of that money coming in, there'll be money going out. Yes.
So I'm intrigued. The state and federal government wants us to e-file, and they want us to use programs such as this so we don't make some mistakes. Heaven forbid, paper simple. Are the federal and state governments ever going to provide these programs to us for free?
Yes. In fact, you can go out to the federal website and you can file for free out there. Their packages are not as user-friendly. Obviously, they don't put a lot of effort into some of this, but there are ways for people to do it free from the federal government out there.
Basically, you want to do it whatever people way it was ahead of time.
Then you can just put the numbers in, bang, 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 bang. Whereas these other packages will say, what was your W-2? And it'll ask questions, were you married? And instead of, did you check the right box here and the right box there? And that's where, like Jim said, you almost have to fill out the tax form before you go out to the federal site and do it there. But they do allow that.
E-file, that was true before.
Yeah.
It's not free to e-file. They make it easier for you. And I assume that these programs have to be some kind of in your e-file. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's where you'll see, some of them, TaxAct is the cheapest there in terms of, so here you start looking at, well, these are basically $19.95 for this. This is $36 up here for this.
So it makes no sense. Why are they charging us
Well, this is the same business about some of the other companies that'll do it too, where you say this is actually making their life easier, because if you file by paper, they have to run it through an optical character reader, and if you didn't, do everything real nice and neat, it bugs out, and then somebody manually has to enter those numbers in.
I would charge people for paper and pencil and they file free.
And then you'd be discriminating against people. So you won't see that. You're right. But that's life there.
I bet that as far as the government providing really good packages, they're probably lobbying Congress of these companies that don't want the government they're making.
Well, and the H&R Blocks and everybody else, because it's this case of filing taxes is a huge business, and so are we going to see changes? Ideally, you'd let's go to a 10% flat tax across the board and get rid of the majority of these deductions and forms and things like that. But it's
Too many accountants and lawyers live like it.
Yeah, there's a lot of money that different people and businesses are making.
Not change it at all.
Yeah.
I saw something in the paper about
Yeah, the government, the whole process of how this stuff works is crazy, and you'd never design a system like this. So when you file your taxes and get a refund, at that initial filing, there's no matching to any other source. So there's no matching to the W-2s. So let's say I file and I say that I made $10,000. 3M paid me $10,000. They don't match to the 3M W-2s that first go round. Later on in the year, when they have time and stuff like that, then they start matching. Did the 1099 information match to the financial institutions? Did the W-2 match to the company information? Then they start matching stuff, and that's where typically audits and things like that, audit notifications and things like that will pop out when things don't match. But initially they aren't matching, and the reason that they'll say is because a number of the companies haven't got the information in, they can't hold, or they don't want to hold up the refunds. But what it does is it opens the door to all this fraud and corruption, because if somebody has your Social Security number, or if somebody has some basic information, they can file your income tax, put any amounts on there that they want, and potentially get a refund. And then you come along later and file, and the IRS says, wait, somebody's already filed. You must be the bad one. And then it's a hassle for you to clear things up. You won't owe anything or that, but it'll be a hassle for you to clear things up. But the federal government should not have paid out. They should have matched to some of this stuff, or at least wait until the information comes in. But they'll say, well, we don't have the computing power to do that. We don't have the manpower. The businesses aren't sending stuff in. We can't. When the businesses send stuff in, they have to have jobs on their end to load data into these massive server farms and databases and stuff like that, and all that takes time. And when you're talking about the huge number of people filing and all these individual numbers.
Fraud, 1%, that I will be a victim of fraud. I bet you it's in that ballpark of 0.1%. Yeah, right.
I would say a fraction of a percent.
Well, I don't know. I know two guys, 3Mers, that have had the problem. I don't know.
How many 3Mers do you know? Yeah. 200 is already done.
Now, one of the problems there is it depends on where the information is gotten from, and I'm not sure
Nobody
how.
knows.
What's that?
Nobody knows.
No, well, I know where some of it comes from. When there was the Target data breach,
Okay, yeah.
that information is sold to another provider. That provider puts that information up on a website. I can buy that information. So if I'm looking to hack somebody and use their social security numbers and do this, yeah, I can get that. I can buy that. In some cases, it's 99 cents a person, or $1.29, or $2 a person. It's a low amount, and you can buy this information. And then that person then usually uses it to open up new credit cards, or to file taxes, or to do various things. So if your account was hacked in some of these other places, then certainly you have a higher probability of somebody filing taxes or doing stuff. And that's where getting the fraud alert or some of these other services.
You end up with a separate tax ID number, and you end up with two personal information things that you have to know in order to find it.
Right.
And you have to file with paper only, not e-file. So that's what John Robinson just doing here. As far as I know, that's what that is.
Yeah, it can get messy, certainly.
And they have no idea who's doing it, or why they did it, or how it happened.
Okay, any other